So next, let's go ahead and build our create event page. So let's close all that, Control B, and then let's navigate into app and into logged in and into create event and into page.js right there. And then now what I'm going to do is we're going to do the following. We're going to give this a class name of mxauto, margin top of 10, max width -2xl, and then space -y-4. And then inside here, we're going to have an h2. So this h2 is going to have a class of margin bottom of 4 and text-4xl, text-xl, and then font-bold. And then this is just going to say create event. Now save that, and you should see right here. It should come right here. Okay, it comes there because in our layout, we need to fix something in our layout. So this layout right here, so the layout that is inside the logged in, what we need to do is we need, let's say we need this children to have a class of padding top of 20 so that it pushes away from this part and then comes down. There we go. Fantastic. And then we can go back into our page.js to begin creating our form. Now for this form, I'm going to have a div, and then we're going to use the next 15 form component like so. So the way you import it is we're going to say import form from next/form. And then when we submit the form, so on submit, we're going to have a function that is called handle create event. And let's go ahead and create that function. So const handle create event is going to be an arrow function that takes in the synthetic event of e, and it's going to say e.prevent default. So this is basically going to be the function for now, because this function is going to be calling Convex. So we have not yet set up Convex fully, but this is going to suffice because we don't want the page to keep on reloading when we are testing out the form. Now once we do that, the form is going to have a class name here of grid, so that we can give it a gap of 4 all around for every element that is going to be inside. And then inside this form, we're going to have a div that has a class of grid and a gap of 4. And on small screens, then the grid columns are going to be 2. And then inside this div, we're going to have an article. And inside this article, we're going to have a label component, which we install from ShadCN. Make sure that you import components UI label. So the label here is going to have an HTML4 attribute, and this one is going to be the event name. And then it's going to have a class name of margin bottom of 2, and it's going to be an inline block, and then it's going to have font semi-bold. So, and then the text is going to say event name. So event name, and then below the label, we're going to have an input, which is coming from components UI input, which is a self-closing component. And then the input type here is going to be a type of text. The ID is going to be the event name so that it links to this label. And then the placeholder, placeholder is going to say event name. And then it's going to be a required input. And then we're going to give it a minimum length. So the minimum length for the name is going to be 3. And then the max length for the name is going to be 64. Now we're going to turn this input into a controlled input using NextJS use state hook, or that, not NextJS really, but React use state hook. So let's go ahead and do that right away. So const name and set name is equal to use state, and this is going to be imported from React, and by default it's just going to be an empty string, so that now we can turn this into a controlled input. We can give it a value of name, and on change we're going to say access our synthetic event of e, and then say set name into e.target.value. So basically set it into whatever is typed inside the input. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy out this article. So I'm going to copy this article down, but still within the div. Now I'm going to save that so that you can see why we added the grid right here. And when I save that, you're going to see that we have an error that says we're importing, oh, we need to mark this as use client. Anytime that you're using a hook in NextJS, in NextJS server components, you need to mark the file as use client. So now we're going to see that our application is going to look very, very nice in 3, 2, 1, and show. I almost got it. Okay, so we get two errors here, don't mind that now. So we already know that this is our event name, and this is going to be the event date. So for this second input, or rather for the second label, we're going to say this is the event date, and this one is not going to have an input, so we can safely remove all this. Instead, we're going to be using the popover component as well as the calendar component from ShadCN. So event date, this should also say event date. And then below this label, we're going to have a popover component. So popover from components UI popover. And then the popover is going to have a popover trigger. So popover trigger from components UI. Always make sure. And then this is a button, so we need to pass in as child that we can have a button inside here. And the button is going to have a variant, which is going to be dynamic, which we're going to add in a moment. But then the class name here is going to be using curly brackets CN, which is how you can add dynamic class names. So CN, and then we're going to say these are class names of width-full, and then justify-start, border neutral -800, text left, font normal, and then I'm going to add a comma here and say that when there's no date, which is a state value that you have not created, so don't worry. So when there's no date, when that is true, then we simply want the text to be text muted foreground. Can't spell foreground. Okay. Now the value for this, the variant rather, is going to be a dynamic template string like so. And then we're going to say that when date is true, then we want the variant to be the secondary color. And then when it is not true, then we want it to be the default like so. Now let's go ahead and create this state value. And I think let me just go ahead and create all the state values so that you don't have to keep on coming up and down every single time. So you're going to have about 5 state values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this, oops, close that. So this second one is going to be the date and then set date, and this one is going to be an empty string like so. Next is going to be description and set description, so description and set description. Next is going to be the location and set location, so location. And then next is going to be organizer and set organizer like so, and it's also going to be an empty string once again. So that's looking okay. Now we can continue to build out this form. So now this is working. So if I go ahead and save this, then we should be able to see something on the screen once it reloads. So it says let this reload. Okay. And you know what? We need to add something inside this button. I think that's the issue. So inside the button, we're going to have a calendar icon. So calendar icon. Which one should I use? This one or this one? Let me use the calendar like so. And then this is going to have a class name of margin right of 2, and then height of 4, and then a width of 4 like so. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and check for if date exists. Then we want to go ahead and format the date. So format the date that is passed in the form of the DO, so month, and then year. Now this is coming from date FNS, which we need to install. Otherwise, we're going to get an error. So what am I doing wrong? There's something wrong somewhere. There's something wrong somewhere. What did I do? Undo. Oh, you know what? I know the issue. So this is a tertiary operator, so it needs a closing the what's it called, the full colon. So if it is not true, then we're going to have a span here that says pick a date. Okay, now Control J to open up your terminal, and then inside the installs tab right here, the terminal, we're going to say pnpm add date-fns, and then let's wait for that to install. And actually not, as this is installing, let's just go ahead and continue building this out. So after the popover trigger, we're going to have popover content like so, and we're going to give this a class name of width-auto and padding all round of 8. Oh, sorry, padding all round of 0. What am I doing? Padding all round of 0. And then inside here, we're going to be rendering a calendar. So calendar. So the calendar here is going to take a mode, which is, we're going to give it a mode of single. When we select it, so selected is equal to, is going to be dependent on the date state value. And then on select, meaning when you change the date, we want to change set date as well. And then we're going to say initial focus, and then close that out because it is a self-closing. And let's see, this should have finished. Fantastic. Right here, control spacebar, we should import it from date-fns like so. Fantastic. And then now we can safely save that, and then let's hope nothing breaks on the screen. Okay, so we're getting an error here, but this is the dialog trigger. Come on, is it the dialog trigger? I think the dialog trigger has an issue, but why didn't it detect at that time? So dialog trigger needs to be as child, so as child right there for the dialog trigger, and then let it reload once again. And button is not defined in the popover, so right here we just say control spacebar, and then once again components UI button, and then let it reload again. And oh my god, control spacebar right here, enter, and then now we should see something on the screen. And there we go. Look at that. Fantastic. Now when I say pick a date right there, it gives me, oops, where that's, oh, you know what, I'm rendering the wrong component. Let's take a look at ShadCN calendar. ShadCN, I think I'm rendering a wrong component. Wait, it's not the wrong component. Because it should give me this drop down, but what am I importing? Calendar icon from Lucid React, and then calendar from, okay, I see. Okay, I see. So this should say calendar icon from Lucid React, and then the calendar that I want to show, where is it? Oh, now I need to import it. So I now need to import it because it was using the icon instead of the calendar component. So the calendar component, did I not install it? Components UI, calendar right there. So the calendar component, okay, let me just go ahead and copy this to get it. Components UI calendar, and then just paste it right here, save that, and then now it should give me the calendar. Once it reload, calendar has already been declared. Where? Oh, remove that. It happens to the best of us. Okay, now let that reload again. And there we go. So that now I can pick a date, and we have our nice looking calendar right there. Fantastic. So that now look at this. Okay, once it reloads, reload, because this is the previous error, so it's still showing the previous error. So once it reloads like that, then I can say pick a date, and you can see that now when we pick a date, it selects that particular date, and then it updates it right there. Fantastic. And what we're doing there is, if you saw, we are saying that on the button right here. So when we pick a date, then the variant that we're getting in the button is the secondary, And if we don't pick a date, then it's just the default, which is looking gray like that. Now, something I do want to do is I want to change the border styles of the input. So I'm going to go into my input.jsx, and then instead of this having the border input, I'm going to say border neutral dash 800, so that it's going to have the 800 border neutral like so. And then when we focus on it, see that when we focus on it, focus visible, I want to change this ring to ring neutral dash, I think I used 700, I can't remember well. Let me see. 700, let's say 600, I think, so that it's just a bit lighter. I think that's okay. So when you focus on it, then it gets just that bit lighter. Okay, next we are building the event description. So right after this div, we're going to create another div. This div is going to have a label, and the HTML for this label is going to say event description, and then close it out. It's going to have a class name of margin bottom of 2, inline block, font semi-bold, and then the text is going to say event description, and then below the label we're going to have a text area. So text area component from components UI text area. The ID is going to say event description so that it links to the label, and then the placeholder is going to say enter event description, and then it's going to have 8 rows. So rows is equal to 8 because the default one is a bit too small for me, so 8 rows is going to increase it, set it to required, and then the value for this is going to be description, which is the state value that we've just created. And then on change, we're going to say e is equal to set description into e.target value like so, and then we're going to give it a min length, so min length of 5. Is it 5? Let's just use 5, it's okay. And then max length is going to be 500 characters, so 500 like so. Close it out, save that, and I think let's bring this to downwards just to keep in line with the structure that we had on top, right? So we have that as a text area. Let's check it out. You can see that that is our text area, looking fantastic. And then let's check it out. I want to change the border as well. So inside the text area, I'm going to give it, instead of border input, I'm going to say border neutral dash 800. And then for the focus visible right here, I'm going to say border neutral dash 600, so that it looks like that as well. Now, the reason why these are aligned like so is because of the grid that we have on the form. So if you check out the form has a grid gap of 4, so it separates it out, just the elements inside the form, and in this case it's the divs. And then for every div that we have inside here, we are setting them to have a grid gap of 4, which is this gap. And then on small screens, we are setting them to be 2 side by side. So because the event description, I don't want it to have rather another element on the side, so I set it as its own. That's why we have a div inside here which only has the text area, but this first div has 2 articles, so 1, 2. Okay, and then next we're going to build our event location. So it's going to be easier if I just copy this first div. You know what? Let me just copy the article. So copy the article, and then let's go below this div of the event description. We're going to create another div that has the same class names of grid gap dash 4 and on small screens grid columns dash 2, and then paste in that article. But this is going to say event location, and then this is going to say control D, so event location. Okay, required min length 364, that's okay. And then this is now going to say location, and then this is going to say set location. Okay, and then below this article, we're going to paste another article. This is going to say organizer, so event organizer. So event, once again, control D, organizer. and then this is going to say organizer, and then set organizer. Fantastic. Let's save that, and we should have the rest of them right here. So event location, event organizer, and then finally we can have our submit button. So right after this div, we're going to have a button here, and the button is going to say create new event, and then we're going to give it an on click here. So on click, we're going to give it the same function as the form. So handle create event is going to have a type of submit, so it's going to be our submit button, and then the variant here is going to be secondary, and then the size for the button is going to be large to make it just a bit bigger than the rest of the buttons. And there we go. So create new event. Fantastic. So we have our form working. Now what we're going to do in the next video is we need to work on the database. So the form submission to the database, which is basically implementing this function right here. Okay, so see you in the next video.